The only reason he's in prison is he's revealed the war crimes of politicians and the like in America and Australia, Britain, and we want some justice for him. He's a journalist and a publisher. He's done nothing different than the New York Times. It's a First Amendment issue. Free Julian, thank you, brother. So, we want you to know that we have to stand, the people of the world have to stand up for justice, or we won't have any.
Support Julian.
We are all the same. Facts with proof. Facts are in demand. We are all Assange.
Do you know Julian Assange?
I know him. I don't know him personally, but
yeah,
I know.
Of course.
I know. Of course, why not?
Is Julian Assange really a journalist?
Including 2 Reuters journalists who, quote, penetrate the inner workings of government and reveal an avalanche of inconvenient truths in a global publishing coup. One of those many inconvenient truths was the exposure by the video called Collateral Murder.
Keep fighting. Keep pushing for a pardon for Julian Assange. We must stand up and fight for Julian no matter what. We are all Assange.
I think if 95% of the people walking past actually knew the facts and understood the issues, they'd be here as well, because it is an incredibly important issue. It's going to determine how free the press is over the course of the next, well, probably the rest of the century, I guess. So it's really a watershed moment, the Julian Assange extradition trial outcome, because it is a trial based around freedom of speech. It's based on the charges that Assange is being subjected to are purely and simply about the right to publish evidence of war crimes and terrible acts that have been committed by Western governments. I mean, it's not just Western governments. Any system is capable of corruption, and that includes Western governments. And Western governments are more powerful in the present era than other governments are, so it's more important to keep a close eye on the powerful, because they have the ability to conduct themselves without much introspection and without much scrutiny. And Julian Assange is one of the first journalists in recent history who's not only subjected the governments to scrutiny, but also built a system that has let them feel the wrath of victims. And such as in the recent extradition hearing, there was evidence given by a person who was subjected to torture, unlawful torture, without any basis. He was mistaken for a terrorist or something like that, and he was picked up and tortured and then discarded. And this was conducted in our names by our governments. And it's not just an isolated incident. There's plenty of instances where this kind of thing has happened. And all Julian is being punished for and charged with is telling people about this and revealing the truth by being in touch with whistleblowers within the government, within the army, who have access to primary sources about the wrongdoing. And if we don't want to ever be able to hear that kind of thing, then what kind of a society are we going to live in the future? It's going to be a fascist-style society. And it might not happen today, it might not happen tomorrow, it might not even happen in our lifetimes, but the important thing is that the principle is there, and it's only going to get worse. And it's the unfortunate thing is that we are acting in a fascist-like way towards other countries, towards countries that are much smaller and less powerful than ours, and we're taking advantage of their vulnerabilities for resources and for our own ends, for strategic ends. And unfortunately our media doesn't talk a lot about that, the mainstream media, but one of the great things about the era that we live in is that we've got access to platforms like Twitter and Facebook and things like that enable us to communicate with people in those countries and people who are experts in those countries and academics and things like that who otherwise wouldn't really get a say. And so that's a terrific thing. And Julian has been at the vanguard, at the forefront of the people who are telling the truth and talking out about the injustices that exist today. And that's why we're here. We're here to support him and we'll be here for as long as we need to, because the truth should never be criminalized. And what kind of a world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a world where it's okay for our government to commit war crimes? We've just seen that recently with the Afghan releases, that it wasn't just an isolated incident, it was over and over and over again. And that's what happens when you go to war. It's, Abu Ghraib, black sites around the world, etc. It just keeps happening, and we shouldn't be in these countries in the first place. We should be resolving these problems that exist in other countries in a constructive way. And there are lots of options available to us other than drone strikes and invasions and so on. There's all sorts of aid that we could be rendering. There's all sorts of political support we could be giving. But we're just choosing to do the things that result in great profits for a small number of people who hold shares in military industrial contractors. So it's not a great state of affairs, and that's why we're here. We're here to speak out against it. And as I said, the vast majority of people, I believe, would be with us if they knew the truth, and we're here to educate them. Talking about Google, it's use as a search engine for our purposes, for the purposes of people who are interested in politics and geopolitics and learning about what governments are doing, is increasingly limited. You have to be really skilled at phrases to knowing what to search, because nothing comes up on the front page. You get all the
articles.
Mainstream. And Chris Hedges talked about that when his articles were deranked and his sites were deranked for the purposes of politics and international affairs. I mean, Twitter is a much better search engine than Google. You can go to the search section in Twitter and search, and you can search by top results, but you can also search by recent results for the purposes of understanding things like, for example, about WikiLeaks or about a certain issue like a terrorist attack or whatever. You're going to get more of you're going to get a plurality of views from Twitter, whereas from Google you're more likely just to get the view of the mass media, and that's just one opinion. And I find personally that the only way to get a proper understanding of an issue is to get conflicting opinions and different opinions and opinions from people on, if there's two opposing sides, I want to hear both arguments so that I can decide which parts of which arguments have merit. And it's very rarely the case that one side has all the right answers. It may be that both sides have an argument that has merit to some extent. So, and that's what, as we've discussed before, that's what Twitter allows us to do. So that's always helpful. What did Snowden tweet the other day? Don't look at the source, look at the truthfulness of the information, which is what we should be doing. There's plenty of people I disagree with politically who I've liked their tweets, or I've agreed with them, or I've commented that they're right, because it's just indisputable that what they're saying is correct. And anyone who's partisan all the time, I think, is missing the point of modern political communication, because it's more nuanced than left and right. And I don't think those descriptions have a lot of utility these days. I think it's probably time for a new sort of a paradigm, and that's kind of like what we need Julian for, to do something like that.
The Nuremberg war crimes trials of 1945-46 deemed that the crimes of those soldiers were secondary to the crimes of the politicians who invaded those countries. Nuremberg, right? That's where they charged the Nazi war criminals. Our economy functions on the motive of profit. And right now, you know what the biggest profitable business in the world is? It's war. You ask some of those war companies, Boeing, right? Some of those other companies like Raytheon. Did you know, people, that in the incoming Biden regime, right, Lockheed Martin, right, do you know that one of the board members, the executive members of Raytheon, one of the largest war companies in the world, is going to be appointed the Secretary of Defense in the United States. By the way, the Secretary of Defense is a bit of a misnomer. It does not mean what it says. These are the secretaries for war. Secretaries for war and murder. These are the ones that should be on trial. These are the ones who should be in jail, not Julian Assange, who is a journalist who exposed their crimes. These are the ones who should be in jail, right? Not Julian Assange, a journalist. Not him. People, capitalism is threatening the world with an almighty obliteration, with nuclear holocaust, right? We have an opportunity and we have a responsibility to our children, to the ones that we love, to civilization. We have a duty to leave the world in a better state than in which we entered that world. And right now, that is not happening. It's not happening, people. The world that we are leaving for our children is worse than the one in which we entered, right? We have a duty to them to change that. Well, we can't let it happen. You know, World Socialist Revolution as an opportunity to overthrow capitalism, free the whistleblowers, end the wars for profit, and use the enormous expenditures for war. Instead of war, how about building up people's lives? And something as basic as that. America spends more money on war than they do on healthcare. How do you work that one out?
Mate, Julian Assange is a belting kid. I tell you what, he's a belting lad. He spoke up for his rights and all that, right? And I tell you what,
Free the truth.
The world needs more people like that, doesn't it? Exactly.
Free the truth.
More people like that.
All the major political parties of Australia and the trade unions, the once proud trade unions that rallied against apartheid in the Vietnam War, they're all practicing stunned mullet silence over the injustice against this proud Australian. Julian Assange, free, free,
Julian Assange.
Free, free,
Julian Assange.
free, free.
Julian Assange.
This week there was some information put out by Project Veritas, which was a video which showed that Julian had contacted the American government, the US government, to try and get protection for people because of some leaks that were going out, not by WikiLeaks, but by a ex-employee of WikiLeaks. And Julian spoke to Cliff Johnson, who was a lawyer who worked with Hillary Clinton to try and get the word out and try and protect people. It just shows again, Julian never wanted to put any lives in danger. He only ever wanted to protect people and bring the truth out, and yet his character's smeared.
I'd like to give a plug to a local inner city radio station, Radio Skid Row, FM 88.9. Radio Skid Row. It's running a series of advertisements on our behalf between now and the new year.
Julian Assange is a journalist who disclosed government wrongdoings and war crimes through WikiLeaks. Julian Assange is an Australian held in a London prison awaiting an extradition ruling which could result in 175 years in jail in America. Prime Minister Scott Morrison pick up the phone and ask US and UK leaders to drop the persecution of Julian Assange.
Come on, free Julian Assange, free Julian Assange.
Radio Skid Row, way to go!
Way to go, Radio Skid Row!
The aircon was well, I thought I was staying here.
Yeah, we're also here representing David McBride. He is a true patriot because he stands up for justice. He stands up against his colleagues. He's received a very rough treatment. He's facing a sentence of decades for having revealed the truth of the crimes committed in Afghanistan.
The wars in Afghanistan, Iraq and Syria. The wars that people like Julian Assange have been exposing the truth of those wars. Free Julian Assange!
Very good job. Sign the online petition, mate. Look, yeah, good idea. It's Philip Adams and Amnesty International.
Do we want to live under the shadow of the corporate lies that are being propagated by the corporate media, News Limited, people like that? Or do we want to know the truth?
Stella Morris this week said that Julian's still missing his warm clothes, and it's really cold in Belmarsh in London, and he's got books up against the window to try and provide some insulation, but it's really not working. He's cold and he's not a well man. So please write to your local member, write to the warden at Belmarsh and ask them to provide Julian with warm clothes and bedding. That's the least that can be done for this poor man.
Anyone who like the life to be peaceful and beautiful should sign the petition for Julian Assange to be free and never will have a refugee like me in this country, and we all get together as a one nation and appreciate the life and nature and freedom of speech and honesty. And very good to be here, and thank you for all support. We are hoping Julian Assange to be free next week. Mr. Trump has to pardon him, and we're counting the seconds for this.
There was a lot of rumour and innuendo going around this week as well surrounding or regarding Julian's being pardoned by President Trump. There was a video of Rudy Giuliani that was going around social media circles where it showed him speaking up for Julian Assange, but that was from back in 2018, which a lot of people didn't pick up, including myself. So just keep up the fight, everyone. Don't be complacent. Merry Christmas, everyone. Let's get Julian home for Christmas.